Hi everyone, thanks for coming. I'm going to talk about, I'm an economist, I'm actually a labor economist, and I'm going to review some of the, I think, more interesting and important economics literature, both empirical and theoretical, on the impact of automation technologies on employment and wages. There's a lot of content I want to go through. If you have questions about some of the papers, I'm happy to email you the papers I'm referring to. I can email you the bibliography. So I'll give a brief overview and context. Then I'll talk about some of the more interesting and important empirical findings. And then also some interesting and important theoretical insights that have developed since the onset of more automation technology. So it's affected the macroeconomic modeling, for sure. And then some takeaways. So what is an automation technology? I'm going to lump robotics and then also this idea of artificial intelligence technologies as both falling under automation technologies. And for AI technologies, one paper dates the commercial birth to about 2012, and another paper identifies the key features of AI technology that are empirically relevant for the purposes of estimation and modeling. So one thing I want to note is that many economists have thought of artificial intelligence technologies, particularly ones that involve deep learning or machine learning. It can serve as a general purpose technology, and the reason that a general purpose technology is important is that it can have widespread effects on the production of all sorts of goods and services. Now, what is the context that we're working with? Well, there's a long history of discussing the impact of technology and jobs starting from the Industrial Revolution. Another thing that is important to know is everyone is seeing, and labor economists are documenting, the declining employment to population ratio. The rate of non-employment has been increasing, particularly for prime-aged males. And it's particularly concentrated in the manufacturing sector. Another thing we're seeing in the macroeconomic statistics is that the labor shared income, or the relative contribution of labor to producing output, has been declining in the US. And then at the same time, labor economists have been documenting the polarization of wages, which I'll illustrate a bit more in the next few slides. And then more recently, there's been research. There has been research on how automation and AI technology interact with jobs, but I want to emphasize that this research is relatively sparse and not very detailed. And so there's many calls for collecting much more detailed firm-level data on how AI technologies are deployed in firms and how it changes the nature of jobs. So I'm stealing this from the presentation of David Otter, a well-known labor economist at MIT, just to illustrate how jobs have been changing over time. So one key observation is something called the polarization of work, which is reflecting the polarization of wages. Basically, there's been a relative increase in sort of low-skill jobs, rising employment in personal services like cleaning, security, recreation, health aides, and also an increase in high-skilled technical jobs, professional, technical, and managerial work, whereas there's been a decline, falling employment in production work, office clerical work, and certain kinds of sales work. For college, it's definitely positively impacting college-educated workers. So among college-educated workers, their occupational relocation is upward. So they're being increasingly employed in high-skilled professional, technical, and managerial work, and not so much in mid-skill production. And with little change in low-skill employment, And then particularly the non-college educated workers, the mobility is almost exclusively downward, particularly non-college men. They're leaving middle skill production positions, and even non-college women. So this is important because low-skilled women's employment opportunities have been on the upwards for a while, since the 1960s, but most recently we're seeing that non-college educated women are leaving the middle skill occupations. And all non-college adults are entering service jobs, food services, cleaning, security, hospitality, and care occupations. So the conceptual framework that I want to introduce in interpreting some of these results is how an economist would think about it, which is that a combination of labor and capital gives economic output. And I just want to emphasize that when thinking about automation technologies, you can think of it in terms of two effects. One is a displacement effect in which labor is directly displaced, which reduces labor demand, so that reduces employment and wages. But economists like to emphasize that there are these countervailing, we could call it reinstatement effects, that happen as new jobs are being created. So the creation of new tasks in which labor has a comparative advantage. And the effects that people are trying to measure are usually a combination of the two forces. So if we see a negative effect, it basically means that the displacement effect has outweighed any positive effects from reinstatement. And also, I also want to emphasize that these measures often do not look at the quality of jobs. Often people talk about employment, but they don't talk about wages, which is an important aspect. And also, the precarity of jobs has been changing over time, and many of the economic studies do not measure this either. So some empirical findings. So this is way too much text, but I want to just emphasize, there's been lots of research showing a negative effect on wages and employment from different kinds of technologies, and we can classify them differently. One famous study in 2003 looked at computerization, which is a type of automation technology. And they look at data over many decades, and they find that actually using their particular model of computerization, you can explain the demand shift favoring college labor. So that's just computers, and this is back in 2003, before AI technologies, or our AI technologies really came onto the horizon. 2006, another paper looks at the polarization of the US labor market. And then another one, a more recent one, looks at automation specifically. So in this paper, they find that automation displaces employment and reduces labor share of value added in the industries in which it originates. So this is important. These own industry losses are offset by indirect gains in the service industry. So new jobs are being created, and because of aggregate demand, because certain things are becoming cheaper now. But however, in that particular industry, the labor share losses are not made up elsewhere, reflecting the lower wages of the new jobs. So when macroeconomists talk about a falling labor share of income, it could come from a combination of two sources. Wages are lower and employment is lower. And when macroeconomists talk about, the effect of this and this technology doesn't seem to affect employment rates, you want to ask, well, what about the labor share of income, which is reflected in wages? Often, the wage structure is changing, as in many people are being reallocated to lower wage jobs. So one interesting paper, I think, is they particularly look at robots, the effect of robot automation on all sorts of industries. And what I like about this paper is that they find that they do not find positive and offsetting employment gains in any occupation or education group. So So this is evidence against the rosy idea that new jobs are going to be created that will offset the losses. They remain negative after controlling for all sorts of things like industry composition, demographics, and competing factors, such as the exposure to trade. So another thing I want to emphasize is that the research has shown that the role of China or international trade is actually much less on the effect of employment and wages, is much less quantitatively than the role of changing technologies. So I like this paper because they explore a variety of different channels, and they show pretty convincingly that the role of, and this robot automation seems to be very significant in the decline in employment and wages. And this one is using German labor market data, the use of robots in the German market. And they say that employment doesn't seem to be affected, but my comment is they're not emphasizing the effect on wages. And also the human capital stock in Germany is different from the US. So this is another measure. Oh, I already did this. Okay, and then a whole series of papers showing that workers with less skills and education are more affected by the adoption of automation technologies. And at the same time, high-skilled workers benefit. And high skill does not necessarily mean high educational attainment. If you have a PhD in history, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to benefit from the rising demand for technical skills. So here are some papers, another set of papers. A common thread I'm finding is that middle-educated workers are not benefiting, low-educated workers are not benefiting. And in particular, young men with low levels of education experience a very particularly sharp drop in routine manual employment. And this one paper finds that there's an overall reallocation of employment to non-employment and the reallocation of labor to low-wage occupations. This is translating. People are losing jobs, and if they find a new job, it's in a lower-wage job. This particular paper looks only at manufacturing, which comprised about 20% of jobs in 1980. They emphasize that trade, in particular the Chinese import shock, can only explain a relatively small share of the decline in manufacturing. So they're writing at the end of this, well, they basically find that things like automation technologies contribute a larger share. And so they're saying that policy efforts to address the adverse labor effects of trade will not reverse the broader trend in manufacturing employment that significantly weakened labor market options, particularly for less educated workers. So I'm emphasizing this because there's a trade war going on, and there's this idea that a lot of our economic ails are coming from trade with China, but the evidence says otherwise. And in general, there's all this evidence showing that there's a shortage of skilled workers in the manufacturing sector and other sectors too. This paper takes aim at the immigrant narrative. It looks at the effect of robots in displacing workers, and it's emphasizing. So these two economists have written a lot about the role of immigration on the economy. Here they're emphasizing that the role of robots has a much more negative effect than the role of a low-skilled immigrant. And then in general, when people talk about AI technologies, I'll need to find the source for this. They find that once you introduce an AI technology, you need people around it to explain the technology, to train the technology, because they often use large data sets, and also to maintain and modify the technology. Now, all of these things require lots of skill. Now, another point I want to make is that adoption of technologies and job displacement is not necessarily instantaneous, so I'm going against all the fear mongers out there. There's actually a lot of evidence for implementation lags of not just AI technologies, but a lot of other general purpose technologies. So managers of different firms may treat shop for labor differently depending on whether they view workers as partners in the production process or as being replaceable. Shifts in organizational structure are going to be needed for different kinds of technology, for example, from the valve manufacturing industry. And also, we need to remember that when managers think about replacing labor, they weigh the relative costs of labor and capital. So a technology that requires the hiring of many expensive AI programmers is less likely to be deployed, actually, because the market for the people for those kinds of skills is actually bid up very high right now. Okay, and then PE and international competition concern. So I'll start with 2 last points. One point is that technology adoption does not translate to productivity growth for the overall economy anyway. There's lots of research showing a slowdown in productivity growth, even though there has been significant increases in certain measures of productivity. Certain measures of technology, such as computer processing speeds or the ability of AI technologies to read and process images and text. Some theoretical insights. Because of all of this, the macroeconomic profession has really shifted in starting to model automation technologies as producing tasks rather than outputs, and this is huge impacts in thinking about which are the forces that are increasing demand for labor and decreasing demand for labor. So some takeaways. What about work of the future? David Otter classifies the new jobs being created in the census into 3 categories: frontier jobs, wealth work, and last mile jobs. So just to give you a sense of what types of jobs are being created. So a frontier job is a very technical job relating to AI or robotics or electronics. A lot of men go into these jobs. Wealth work is work that serves wealthy people. So hypnotherapist, gift wrapper, fingernail former, barista, horse exerciser, oyster cleaner, that sort of thing. A lot of women go into these jobs. And then last mile jobs. So jobs that are about the last mile of some sort of task. Inspector for a hand package, film touch-up inspector, chat room host, bicycle messenger. So these jobs in general don't pay that much. Last mile workers at the very bottom. Wealth workers get paid a bit more, and then frontier workers get paid the most. And then which jobs? Okay, I'll skip that. So takeaways. Those who are concerned about people or labor should not be cheered by high GDP growth projections. Why? Because the labor share of income has been decreasing over time. We've seen evidence of reallocation to non-employment and lower wage jobs. So the future of labor is looking grim. And a lot of it is due to the role of automation technologies, not as much to international trade or immigrants. Skill formation has and will become more and more important for high wages. New jobs reflect growing income inequality and greater demand for skills. GDP and employment outcomes are not the same nor correlated with human capital outcomes. So actually, I'm a labor economist, I'm much more focused on human capital outcomes such as social emotional skills, educational attainment, and health status, which many of you perhaps are more interested in. Making capital more expensive through debt financing could increase labor demand and wages if automation technologies and labor are very substitutable. So now I'm responding to Ken Smetter's PWBM model. The role of trade on employment is smaller than the role of automation technologies. And some things to ask the techno-utopian people about the creation of new jobs is, well, what are the differences in the skill requirements for the jobs that are disappearing versus the jobs that are being created? What types of new jobs are appearing? How much upward mobility is there? And what kinds of wages and benefits do they offer?
Thanks, Christina. Our next speaker is Sara from Portugal, but also from Delaware University. She will give a talk on unintended consequences of applying basic income policy in response to the artificial intelligence revolution.
Hello. This is a work in progress. My papers, it's not completed, and I don't have like final conclusions guideline question that I have for this paper is whether basic income is a good answer for questions concerning the artificial intelligence revolution. So, in general, you know, that's the most, in media, that's very attractive. The robots are coming, we need basic income because the robots are coming. So if you read Andrew Yang's book, The War on Normal People, that's pretty convincing that the robots are coming, and so we need to do something, and so basic income is a way to kind of mitigate that issue. And in my paper, what I'm trying to look at that question a little bit more deeply, and I'm leaning to the conclusion that yes, artificial intelligence is going to radically change work as we know it. And if that really happens, it's a little bit of futurology, so we don't really know how it's going to go down. But if that happens in a serious way, basic income might not be the best solution for that problem. So I'm sorry, I know this is like a pro-basic income Congress, and I am a basic income advocate nevertheless, but I do see some serious problems with that being the main policy response to that issue. So in this talk, I'm just going to present a little bit first what I think the AI revolution might be if it happens a certain way, and I'm going to illustrate a little bit what impact it will have in jobs and how it, I'll illustrate that with some videos that he's going to play there, and then I'm going to look into what if we use basic income as our main policy to respond to this? Why do I think that might not be the best solution? So we'll start with that. All right, so I'm going to start with how AI is going to change the job markets in a serious way. So basically, we talk, and we've heard before, automation, AI is all kind of mixed. There's robotics, there's artificial intelligence, there's a lot of different things going on, but what's going on with AI is that, so when AI started, there were two problems. One was hardware. You didn't have enough power to process all the data you wanted to process, and the other one was input, so you didn't have enough data. Now both those problems are kind of solved, so with Moore's law, hardware is getting more and more powerful. Every 2 years, I think it doubles or whatever. And data, we have endless amounts of data, so now there's really nothing stopping AI. And what AI does is, so I don't know if you guys have heard of Google playing the AlphaGo game, and Google Brain has learned how to play it and won. So basically it's a game, it's a complex game, it's not like chess, it's more complex. And what AI can do, and has done, and they won the world championship, is you don't put the rules into the AI. The AI observes the players and learns the rules, and then it can play the game and win the game. So a lot of these things that I will illustrate are using that. So they're not necessarily programmed. They can observe your behavior and learn it, and then be creative. So AI does two things. On the one hand, it can replace a lot of monotonous jobs that are repetitive and not interesting for people, but it can also replace a lot of other jobs that are creative and interesting. Right? So this is the big difference now. We're not just talking about replacing monotonous jobs. So when it's a bit strange because when I'll give you several examples of different jobs, but when we bring up something that AI is going to come and replace, say for instance, when I was interviewing Andrew Yang, and I told him about like how people who are working in the fast food industry, they're half automated, so they have to like do the sandwiches at a certain like 10 seconds or whatever. They have to put the the bread in and the cheese in and everything. If they don't follow that route, they get fired or whatever. And he said, oh well, that should be done by should be automated. That job should be automated. That's his answer. Like that's, yes, it's bad that people have to go through that, but that job should be automated. But he fails to say that that job could have been done very differently in a way that was satisfying for the worker. So, but let's just, so this just to keep in mind before we show the videos. All right, so when I talk about how AI is gonna come and change the, jobs for everyone, a lot of people are like, oh, that's crazy, it's not really gonna happen, people will always have jobs, that's not really gonna replace everything, but it is closer than we think. So one thing I wanna show here first is the Amazon Go Shop, which is already happening. I think Scott, I don't know where you are, you've been there. And that's basically the future of retail. So
4 years ago, we started to wonder, what would shopping look like if you could walk into a store, grab what you want, and just go? What if we could weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI into the very fabric of a store, so you never have to wait in line? No lines, no checkouts, no registers. Welcome to Amazon Go. Use the Amazon Go app to enter. Then put away your phone and start shopping. It's really that simple. Take whatever you like. Anything you pick up is automatically added to your virtual cart. If you change your mind about that cupcake, just put it back. Our technology will update your virtual cart automatically. So, how does it work? We used computer vision, deep learning algorithms, and sensor fusion, much like you'd find in self-driving cars. We call it Just Walk Out technology. Once you've got everything you want, you can just go. When you leave, our Just Walk Out technology adds up your virtual cart and charges your Amazon account. Your receipt is sent straight to the app, and you can keep going. Amazon Go. No lines, no checkout. No.
All right, so I think it's this kind of replaces all retail work very easily, and I don't know if there's still gonna be people in the shops to talk to customers. They might be, if we make a push for that, that's not really necessary. So that's one example. Then the next example that everybody talks about is the self-driving cars, self-driving trucks, right? So this example is a little bit more interesting because, and it's a variation of what I was talking about before. So being a truck driver, my husband's grandfather was a truck driver, right? He was very proud of being a truck driver. He was a happy truck driver, right? And it was a job that gave you, first of all, it gave you good pay and also gave you some freedom, because you would go out, you could come do whatever you want, and you just have to get to your destination, right? So when it started being partly automated with GPS and everything, truck drivers get controlled and they know exactly where they are. They have to make like certain spots at certain times, and the job becomes much less appealing as a job, right? So now we think, oh, we need to, this is a kind of a monotonous job that would be better done by automated trucks because people are very unhappy doing this job. And this company, Starkey Robotics, I want to show that video. Can you maximize it if you can?
It turns out very few truck drivers make it to 5 years without an accident. It's the least safe job in America. There's a mental space that people need to go into to be able to watch something monotonous for 11 hours a day, 360 days a year. And I started thinking, what about a robot that did a truck remote control? There's a driver I met who, from the time his daughter was 3 until she was 15, he was only home a day a month. First, it was, he got divorced with his daughter's mother, and he just kind of went out because, he didn't know what to do. And then he stayed out because the money's good, he stayed out because the money's good, he stayed out because the money's good, and at some point, he didn't know his daughter.
You can stop.
She can't say goodbye to people.
You guys can watch this later, but you can see the narrative is that this job's really bad. He doesn't know his daughter because he only gets to see her whenever he's not working. So this is the narrative. AI is going to come and it's going to take over these jobs that are monotonous or bad, and you know, liberate, well, I don't know, they don't even talk about like redistributing the money or anything. But I think like here you can see that they're already replaced, you know, this job is not necessarily bad. It is bad the way it's being done now, that this guy doesn't get to see his daughter. That's what's bad. Like, you shouldn't have to work that much. You should have like a lot of more free time and so forth. It's not, but they make it seem like this job's inherently bad, and the only solution is to, you know, automate the truck and release people from these jobs. So, and there's other examples. So this is, the AI is not gonna replace just jobs that are like repetitive and monotonous. So there's another one, I don't know, what else did I have there? Oh, so Molly, the cooking robot. So that's a robot that can like, we can play that, but he can basically observe you cooking or observe chefs cooking and learn. And you can have this in your house or in a restaurant, and it can be creative. So can you? I just wanted to illustrate a little bit. So you can see all restaurant business, you can use this, you can learn from like the best chefs, and you can just have it, plump it in any restaurant, and it'll cook like the, you know, the best recipes. And it can also be creative. It can learn from, just like the Amazon AlphaGo game learned from observing people playing the game, it can learn from observing people cooking and then create new recipes, right? So this can become, it's not just like, AI is not just coming to replace monotonous, repetitive jobs, it's also gonna replace other things that are, and can be creative. So it can do things probably much better than we can, I think. So there's a lot of other examples, like financial advisors or office assistants, or, you know, anything you can think of. Doctors are using AI a lot because they can search through like databases of symptoms much better than the doctors could possibly do. Lawyers, so the AI revolution is not going to just replace monotonous jobs. It can do what we can do, all we can do, and probably much better than we can do. So if this is true, and if AI does come and does all these things, what are the roles that humans are going to have, right? So maybe it's not going to replace every job. People will still have some work, like you were saying, Christina. You were saying so there'll be a need for tech people, definitely, and maintaining all these things. And there might be other areas where we will still need. We will still need people working with AI. But a lot of work with AI is going to be purely like overseer of what the AI is doing, because I think that a big difference in here is that whilst before, when technology came, we needed to retrain people to be able what's gonna happen if there are not that many jobs beyond basic income. So you either have a low basic income. If you have a low basic income, you have people that are permanently in the poor or a little bit over the poverty line area that don't really have many opportunities to go beyond that. Or you can do a generous basic income, and so you would have people in the middle class area, right? But none of those people are gonna have, I mean, except for the technical elites, they're not really gonna have, if nothing else changes, they're not really gonna have a lot of paths to follow. For, social mobility is not really gonna be available to them. So just instituting a basic income with nothing else, what are the people in the middle, so the low basic income, I think, in that situation is not gonna be good, because that will just create a sort of a permanent, semi-poor class that is just to the side and doesn't have any opportunities. So that, I don't think it's a good solution once the AI is like full force. The generous basic income is a little bit better because it creates a little bit more opportunity for people to have some extra income that they can use for other interactions with other people, like hire other people to do things for them, like, I don't know, other things that they value, right? But more likely, even if you have a generous one, the money that is given for basic income is probably almost all gonna go to buy things that are produced by automated and AI. It's really not gonna go for us to like, I wanna see you sing and I think it's fun, so I'm just gonna pay you at a show or something like that. Because AI is gonna be producing most of the things we consume anyway. So I think it's not enough. And if AI really takes over, we will have to rethink what we are going to do and how we're gonna create incentives and social mobility for us. And it's gonna have to be something very different. I don't know what it's going to be, and like I said, I don't have any conclusions yet. There's a lot of different options, so you can have like an alternative coin, or where you do other things with it, or you can have, I don't know, China's doing those social credit things, which is really weird, but that could be done in a different way. I don't know, there's a lot of different ways, but we need to create, like I'm reading Bertrand Russell, Conquest of Happiness. So we need to create paths for people to find, satisfaction in their lives. And if it's not going to be through producing the things that we want to buy, then they're going to have to create other paths. We have to create other paths. And I don't know if just saying that basic income, that can be a part of it, but it can't just be the only thing that we're proposing. Because if it's the only thing, it might really leave us in a rut, I think. Well, anyway, that's it.
Our next speaker is Karl, and he's going to teach us how to talk about automation and basic income.
Hey, everybody. So I think the wrong way to talk about automation is to focus on the future, the automation-related problems that are coming in the future that might create the need for UBI in the future. I'm not saying it's wrong to mention that, but I think it's really wrong to make that an important focus of the argument for UBI. I know that idea is attracting lots and lots of support to basic income right now. It's one of the reasons basic income is taking off right now, but I think it's a real mistake to focus on that. But that doesn't mean automation is unimportant. What's really important in automation in UBI is to focus on the present and the automation-related issues of the past that have created the problems that we're having in the present. The past and the present, and automation is what we need to focus on. So let me talk about the wrong way, and I'll get to the right way. So the wrong way is, okay, someday robots will replace all labor or all working class labor. People are making this argument, and that's why we need basic income. Well, now, even though this is a realistic possibility, this could happen, it is hard to get people to believe it. It's never happened before, so they think it will never happen. That's really really bad argument. Lots of things that had never happened before happened. Like, used to be, there's never in human history been elevators. Now there are elevators. The several thousand years of human history without elevator was not a proof that we never get elevators. Now, and it happened to horses, and it happened very quickly to horses. Automation always meant more jobs for horses until about 1910. And then by 1920, in the United States anyway, they were just about all the horses except for race horses and handsome cabs were out of employment. It could have, but it's hard to get people to believe it because it seems it's never happened before. It seems so fantastic. It's hard to get people to believe it. So you have a ceiling there of people who are going to refuse to believe it. Even Alan Krugman, who's tweeting today about Andrew Yang and how saying, "Oh, this isn't happening yet. It's against it and so much." But it also gives people an automatic argument. You say, "Oh, against UBI now." If you say, "We need UBI because someday there won't be any jobs because of automation," we say, "Okay, well, let's wait for someday." From here now, and that's not what we need. We need UBI now. And also, automation, even if it does create this massive unemployment, it might not happen as fast as people are saying. And by focusing on it, now we need UBI today because this is happening really quick, and then it doesn't happen quick. People are like, "Oh, they've been saying that for a long time." As a matter of fact, in the 1960s guaranteed income movement, one of the pillars of that was people talking about automation. And it was going to lead to massive unemployment. It did not lead to massive unemployment. But another reason is that automation doesn't look like what we're making it out to be. Is that the problems that automation creates for the labor market do not look like unemployment gets larger and then gets larger and then gets larger, which is what Alan Krugman in his tweets this morning implied was going on. There was a really good presentation that I learned about this. It was given at a NABIG conference 2 or 3 years ago. It was by Paul. That's him in the corner. And what it actually does is, well, actually, what he did was he looked at, was there ever a time in history when capital could compete directly with a capitalist free labor market, when capital could do pretty much everything that labor could do? Is this precedented in history? And it is. Slavery. U.S. slavery, there was for poor white people in the South, there was a regular labor market, and then black people were capital, and the capital could do everything that a free laborer could do. And what you found, it didn't cause massive unemployment among poor white people. What it caused was really low wages, really precarious employment, and real lack of mobility. That is what automation does. And it does this long before it creates massive employment. You throw people out of one sector of jobs, and they go looking for other jobs. They bid wages down in those other sectors, and they might bid employment up in those sectors. So you get a shift of employment. You're often automating away jobs that had good wages and technical skills, and you're putting people in other sectors. And so it doesn't look like the way people are portraying it. And actually, there was some evidence in the first presentation of this that a lot of what we're seeing is actually low. What we're seeing is low wages, as much as we're seeing increases in employment. But another problem with this focus is that it ignores the automation-connected reasons why we need UBI now and actually why it's hundreds of years overdue. So let me get to the right way to focus on automation. Automation disrupts the labor market and people's lives, even if it ends up creating more jobs than it destroys. Whether or not it creates more jobs than it destroys, it takes people that have good wages and have built up skills in a particular sector and says, your skills aren't needed anymore. And you've got to go to the bottom of the labor market, the unskilled labor market, and compete with all of those people to get another job, which is going to drive down the wages of everybody in the low-skilled low-skilled labor market. This is what the Luddite movement was about 200 years ago. The people who were in the Luddite movement, who were against the textile mills taking their jobs away, they weren't foolish people the way we use Luddite now that just hated technology. These were people who were skilled textile makers that were losing their jobs and having to go into starvation wage jobs. So we need UBI to protect these constant disruptions that automation has been causing in our labor market for hundreds of years. Now, but another reason we need it is that automation and its contribute to GDP growth and all the other contributions to GDP growth make it possible to get for us to work the same and consume more, or work less and consume the same, or some combination of those. And in the last 40 years or more, normal people have not seen either lower working hours or increased consumption on average. Most of the gains that we've had in the last 40 years, and we've had a lot. I just looked this up this morning. GDP this quarter is in the U.S. is $57,000 at a rate of $57,000 a year. In this quarter of 1979, it was about $30,000 a year. It's gone up by 90%. That means we could be working the same and consuming almost double what we were in 1979. Or we could be working 45% less and consuming the same. 45% less, that's either 22 hours a week, or that is 27.5 full-time weeks a year. Nobody's doing that. It's not like we're all choosing to consume more. We don't have this option because rents and things have gone up. The increase, most of this increase has gone to the wealthiest people, and normal people who work for a living have not shared in this. You need UBI now to get your share of the benefits of the automation we've had in the last 40 years. That is the prime reason, automation-related reason, that we need basic income right now. You haven't gotten your share. Most people haven't. So automation means that we need UBI now. And it's not in the future. It's long overdue. We need it to protect normal people from the disruptions of the labor market caused by automation. We need it to help normal people get their share of the benefits of automation that we've all helped create in the last 40 years. And we need it to counteract the power effects of automation. When you take the good skilled jobs and you outmode those and throw everybody into the low skilled labor market, you create a pool of very powerless workers that need to take whatever wages they can find. UBI gives them some power to command some better wages. So we need it, and we've needed it for hundreds of years, and I think that's the important argument to make, to connect automation with basic income. Thanks.
Well, three very stimulating talks. Somebody wants to ask a question? Okay. Three questions. You, and yes.
So thank you very much. That was very, very, very excellent. All three. My question is for Dr. Jenq. In terms of just in terms of looking at automation of tasks and thinking versus automation of occupations. I had a business student ethics last semester write this really brilliant paper where she was analyzing the job she had at a call center, at inbound call center processing claims, and talking about how they automated a lot of that, but she still kept her job. But what that meant was that the claims processors now were all dealing with difficult cases. And then her basic argument was, well, you know, the carrot and stick incentive approach that the sort of Taylorist management had done before just wasn't really working anymore. But it kind of made me think about how, what we're maybe seeing is automation of tasks in a given occupation rather than automation of like an entire occupation. I mean, and then where an occupation involves lots of automatable tasks, then right, we see an occupation being automated away. But I'm just wondering what's kind of out there in the literature that kind of looks at that more kind of automation of tasks and how work is changing with regard to kind of the breakdown of tasks being done in any given occupation.
Thank you for that. I completely agree with your characterization that occupations are a bundle of tasks, and automation is trying to replace humans for producing tasks. So your example is very well taken. Now, I'm not an expert in the, so this is more business literature, business case study literature. I'm sure a lot of business professors and researchers are looking at these case studies. And in general, the truck driver actually does not just drive trucks. There's actually a lot of other tasks that the truck driver needs to do. So this example, the call center. Now the labor is being allocated towards the most difficult cases. That actually still means that the employment in the call center is probably going to go down. You're going to take the people with the best socio-emotional skills and focus on the difficult cases. So the people who will benefit are the ones where they have the comparative advantage in dealing with difficult cases. Those are the people with the better socio-emotional skills. So I think that people with better skills or human capital and things that that robots and algorithms can't do will benefit. But overall employment will still decrease. Now the wages of that person who remains because they're good at dealing with difficult customers might actually increase. But overall the labor share of income still might decrease.
Second question with the green shirt.
Question for Dr. Jenq as well. I was wondering if you could comment further on the persistent findings related to these effects on men, and is it entirely accounted for by traditionally male-dominated industries and the effects targeting them first, or if that's controlled for, do some of the effects that you referenced persist?
So if you decompose occupations and jobs into types of tasks, which some of the economists have been doing, so for example, routine manual versus routine cognitive. So routine manual tasks are usually performed by men. And to the extent that routine manual tasks have been replaced by robots and algorithms, that has disproportionately affected men. And then routine cognitive tasks, so clerical work that is routine, that has also more recently been replaced. Now here's where the gender element comes in, because actually most of my research is on gender. So females have been doing pretty well because the increasing educational attainment of females all over the world has given them unprecedented labor market opportunities, so that there's actually a demand for female labor that they normally would have done, but now they have other opportunities, and they can actually spend on replacements for the domestic production at home, whether it be chores or caring for the children. They're looking for substitutes now. Because of that increased demand for typically female labor, I mean, this wouldn't be a problem if there were no gender norms, right? In a world with no gender norms, this wouldn't be a problem. We wouldn't see it. But because of gender norms, lower skilled females have actually done pretty well, because they can go into the roles that higher educated women, they're now free to do all these high educated stuff. Now they don't have to care for other people can do it. So there's the gender element too.
We have this increase of productivity during 20th century, like agriculture, occupation was 80% of population, and it feeds only like 2 billion people in the beginning of the century, and now we are feeding 7 billion with 5% of workers occupied in agriculture. Don't you think this situation, the whole situation, not the UBI situation, is linked with freedom, personal freedom, and like job enslavement, job occupation paradigm? So our state doesn't think how to free people, right? He thinks how to employ them. So it doesn't pay UBI because of it cannot pay UBI, right? It can pay, but it have the paradigm to keep people busy, to keep them working, to deprive them from personal freedom, right? Like freedom of their time. So this is like main goal of economy. It's not the UBI question is come after this paradigm, because this paradigm was chosen before to occupy people as much as possible, to spend their burn their lifetime. Then we came to the conclusion, we need to create jobs to brag about job creation, to demonstrate we created that much job, not to demonstrate we freed that much time, of population in general.
Your question?
My question is, don't you think the problem is more fundamental? It's not about UBI, the ability to pay UBI or the slogans, we need UBI now because it's a retrospective trend, this technological advancement and technological unemployment and stuff like this.
Who wants to
Well,
reply to this?
I think that's important. That's actually a theme that runs through a lot of my writing, that the economy is very much based on putting workers in what I'm calling like a manufactured desperation. We're not in a desperate struggle to meet our basic needs. Humans have been around on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years and have consistently been able to meet their needs very well. But through things like colonialism and the enclosure movement, people very much have put the working class and really all normal people in the position where they must get a job to survive, which puts them in a constant state of fear and desperation that I might someday lose this job, and I'm dependent on this job to survive. And if you look at some of the rhetoric on the enclosure movement, they were intentionally doing this. They're saying, they're having access to the open fields make people lazy. They were working on their own fields, working in their own benefit. They were lazy only in the sense they didn't want to work for the wages that were being offered by wage-paying employers. And they've intentionally put people in this position. We need to take power over our governments and put them that we have to defend the independence of normal people instead of defending this idea that that everyone has to work except for people who own all of our resources, and the normal people who have to work for that group of people. Yeah, that is equally important as what we're talking about.
Hi, this is for Professor Widerquist. I agree with your point that to focus on the future labor substitution effect of automation is to draw attention away from the need for UBI now. I would also say it to some extent ignores the needs of people who've been working historically in the informal sector, especially in the developing world. But my question is, how important to the narrative about why now is the role of technology in enabling the implementation of UBI? So digital identification systems, social registries, mobile money, that is not necessarily automation, but the role of technology in society, which is enabling governments to implement this policy. Do you see those two narratives as separate or as inherently connected?
I don't know. I know that between the 1930s and the 1970s, the United States, along with a lot of other Western industrialized countries, found a set of institutions that helped most normal people's wages keep pace or even grow faster than the economy as a whole. And then beginning over a period of years, that institutional structure was changed so that wages no longer keep pace and have stagnated despite the enormous growth in the economy. Now, to connect to what you're saying, I think you'd need an empirical studies to find out, well, how much of that growth is attributable to automation rather than capital accumulation or other factors. That, for me, for what I'm working on, that is not necessarily the most important thing to me. It's economic growth, what the source of that is, and you're not getting your share. And actually, in some ways, if your sector was disrupted by this, either by you losing your job or people coming from other sectors and competing with you, if your sector is disrupted by this, it's actually harmful to you, even if it's better for people on average. These are the things that I'm focusing on. The role of automation in that, I know it's important. Exactly what it is, how much of a factor, I'll leave that to people who work more directly in automation.
Yeah.
Question also to Karl, but maybe open to everyone. I also totally agree with the analysis of automation, but my first question would be, why does it have to be basic income to solve that problem? Why can't it be any kind of other policy, any redistribution in taxation or common ownership of the productive goods? And the more important question, how do we get the money from the people that currently have it?
Well, a common ownership in goods, I think, is good if it's used to finance a basic income. If it is used to create a bureaucratic structure that really owns everything and then we all have to work for the bureaucrat, it's really no better to work for a socialist, not totally democratic bureaucracy than it is to work for a capitalist one. For me, the important issues there connect with this guy's question. It's about establishing independence for individuals. Is that it is wrong for one person to put, for any person or any group of people, to put another person or group of people in a position where they can't meet their own needs by their own efforts and aren't being compensated for that, but their only way to meet their needs is to go to this group of people that controls the resources and say, I will work for you. If you put people in that position, you give them such a huge disadvantage. And the reason, the most important reason I think it needs to be in the form of basic income is to give people independent access to the resources they need to survive. And that, for me, that's very important. There are a lot of other institutional structures that can move people in the right direction. The more generous welfare states have done that fairly successfully. But the conditional welfare state has never lived up to its promise to eliminate poverty while also judging people as the good people and the bad people. It's never lived up to that promise. We need to start a new model.
And my question for the panel is there a limit to the extent to which people are willing to accept automation, especially in client-facing industries? And the reason why I asked this, I was recently speaking to a guy who's involved in the retail industry, and he was saying that there was a trend that they had observed amongst millennials in all their research, that actually they were finding that millennials were now increasingly likely than before to go to brick and mortar stores to buy things, because they realized that if I buy it online, it's going to take 2 days for it to deliver, whereas I can actually go in person right now and pick it up. And that was apparently a big realization to many millennials. But you know, that they were saying that actually, and wow, and I have this face-to-face interaction, and I can ask the person. So you know, almost that it had gone to saturation point in terms of online, online purchasing, and then it had come back. And I was just wondering, does the panel have any insight or any idea or any opinions on whether we've reached saturation point, or whether people will actually want that sort of human element?
That's for you too.
Yeah, that's well, Sara,
I have no expertise on that one whatsoever. It's got to be one of you.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
sorry.
I don't have any expertise on that either, but I mean, basically it depends on, like, I think price points. So if you're just gonna offer cheaper price points online, people are just, even though they want to encourage brick and mortar stores, they're still gonna go and, you know, get the products the cheapest possible way. So as long as we have this system where, you know, we have a limited amount of money to spend, unless we have more than what we need, we're not going to be able to make those choices. And so that's actually, I mean, I'm work. I think it might not work later, once once technology is much more advanced, then we'll need something else. But for now, it would work, and one thing it could do is, encourage a lot more local business, because people would have more money to spend. But as long as they have a limited amount of money, that's just gonna be, a small amount of the population that's gonna be doing that. Most people are.
This question is for Dr. Widerquist. A particular argument that Andrew Yang uses in favor of his freedom dividend is that the reason why Donald Trump won the 2016 election was that the states that carried him to victory, contrary to the polls, lost the most manufacturing jobs, which he attributes to automation. Would the present day political radicalism and polarization be a good argument in favor of UBI, in your opinion?
Oh yeah, that's present and past. That's the effects of present and past automation. That's closely related to the things I'm talking about. He's not particularly guilty of the problem I'm pointing out. At least if you read his book, if you look at a caricature of Yang, it's all about future there'll be no jobs. Or if I'm sure you've read his book, and you read his book, it's a lot of that stuff about things that are happening now, things that have been happening for a long time, and also some non-automation things. So yeah, I think those are really important.
One thing I wanted to say about whether UBI can affect political preferences, I do want to actually highlight the role of social identity, because there's actually growing empirical evidence in economics showing the ways in which gender norms, and let's not even put aside other types of norms by race, affect a lot of decisions, whether to work, who to marry, that sort of thing. And I think that to give someone who, say, a white-collar male worker who's lost their job and also a large part of their identity, to give them an income, I'm not sure that's going to sort of address a lot of issues about identity and their role in society. Because those norms are very deeply instilled. And so the choice of Trump and support for Trump and other types of far-right movements, which actually have a lot of gendered aspects to it, I think show that it's not just about income, it's about the roles in society too.
I guess this question is for Dr. Jenq. My question is, when you look in history and the manufacturing, as they introduced new technologies, for instance, I read about shoe production in Massachusetts, and it got automated, and so those jobs, cobblers basically, exactly what you're saying, those jobs were changed. The tasks changed, and what was composed of was de-skilled in a lot of ways. So for hundreds of years, there was this job, this identity, and then, because of industrialization, it changed it, and then it, as the way the economy works, that happens to more and more types of jobs. And I'm wondering, is there a metric that you can talk about the speed at which jobs are being kind of automated? Can you actually quantify how technology disrupts, the rate of disruption, I guess, is what I'm talking about. Is there a way to talk about the rate of disruption, and does it correlate with technology in any sensible way?
We're going to take two more questions, the man in the blue suit, and you, and then we can reply to the three, because we only have 2 minutes.
the positions on the panel. Sometimes I feel insecure because although I often say that many things you guys have said, I talk to my good friend Max and he remind me that, well, median incomes are going up and on the aggregate, a lot of the stats look good. And I'm like, well, I'm thinking, am I crazy? So like, how do you counter people, I'm not saying Max in particular, but there's a lot of articles out there that saying, well, things are getting better. So how do you counter that? You know, like it's just, I get insecure sometimes about that. Maybe we're all wrong and things are getting better.
This last question here.
I have a question to Sara. I was a bit surprised when you started. In the beginning you said the UBI is no real solution for the automation problem. So what is the automation problem? And later on you seem to shift the problem of automation to the problem of what people will do. And I got the impression that, to support the gentleman over there, you want to think for other people. Do you think if you don't tell them what to do, they don't know what to do and will die of boredom?
Should I answer first? I don't think I'm going to tell people what to do. But if we're still going to have a money system where getting some sort of income is going to, is going to increase freedom of autonomy for people. So right now we have a system where the more successful you are, the more autonomy and freedom you have, right? So if that's no longer available, but if we're still, say for an example, right? You might want to travel as a person. You're a person who wants to travel, right? I'm giving you a basic income. That's not enough to travel. That's enough to get your basics that you get, from the automated production. That's not enough to travel. So you want to be able to engage in some sort of activity that will allow you to make more so you can travel because you personally want to travel. It's just an example, right? So if there are no paths to do that, then we're all kind of stuck in the same level of income without paths to improve. So I'm not saying that I want to tell people what to do, but I'm saying if basic income is the only answer to the AI revolution, so to the fact that most production will be semi-automated, and if there's no paths for people to take to sort of improve their situation, they'll kind of be stuck in that bubble. And there will be, I don't know if that's going to create a lot of satisfaction. Yes, you can do it in your community. So say if you're an actor and you want to create a show for your neighbors, you can do that. That doesn't cost any money. You don't need extra income for that. You can do it. But if you want to do anything that costs any money and you don't have any way to get more money because there's no paths, because everything's been taken over by AI, that's going to create a problem.
No, just raise the amount of the.
Well, you need to raise it a lot. That was my point. If you have a really low one, that's really bad. If you have a medium one, that's still really bad. You would have to raise it to a point where it actually allows for all those extra things. And it's possible, but that's part of the argument I'm trying to make. And there could be other, I don't know. I don't really know the solution to this. But that was the problem.
Okay, I don't have an answer to the first question. I'll leave that to the others. For the second two questions, the first one, my reading of the evidence, and this isn't also my best area of expertise, is that if you look over, let's say, the last 3 to 5 years, okay, finally, median incomes are in fact ticking up. Well, it's not being shared by everyone. There's a lot of good, hardworking people who are left out of that, and that it's really important to look at, are they keeping pace with GDP or making up for the loss, that the relative loss that normal people have had in all these years. And in all the stuff that I've read, it says that in the last 40, 45 years, most normal people have not kept pace. We're somebody that has the equivalent of the jobs that most of us in this room had in the 1970s in the United States, whatever that equivalent is, we're maybe a few percentage points better off. When if we kept pace with GDP, we would be 90% better off in material terms. I don't have all the stats on that, but that's what I understand from my reading of the evidence. On what you said, I think anybody that supports a generous basic income is opposed to this idea of thinking for other people. Is that not only do we want to think for other people the way we structured our system now, which is where everybody has to get a job to survive, and supposedly getting a wage work is what's going to give you fulfillment in your life. That is trying to think for everybody. And that is also trying to think for people in a self-serving way. Oh, wouldn't it be good for those lower classes if they got a job for me, working for whatever wages I'm willing to pay? And that would really fulfill their lives. That's the way the rhetoric has been controlled in most Western countries since the colonial period and the enclosure movement. Not to mention slavery. How much better off those slaves were when they brought them here and taught them how to work. And it was always a lie and always wrong. And for most normal people, it's self-defeating. It's been very easy to sell a middle-class person on this idea that UBI is for those other poor people who won't work and not for you who will work. UBI is for every normal person. The worst thing you can do to a worker is put them in a position where they have to work. And stopping this idea of thinking for other people, I think, is one of the key things that UBI is about.
Going to the question about the rate of disruption. So I think most smart economists will not give a prediction because it depends on factors that are dependent on industry and occupation. So one factor is the relative cost of the technology versus just using labor. So even if you have a technology that replaces the labor, but it's more costly than just hiring labor, which is, in developing countries, it's cheaper to hire the labor than to use technology, then you're not going to see that deployment. So if wages are very high because union bargaining power is quite strong, there's actually an increased incentive to automate because then wages are artificially high. Another issue is the pace of disruption also depends on whether the organizational structure of the industry, how long it takes to adjust to using that technology. So in the valve manufacturing industry, it took some time because the valve manufacturing industry went from commodity production to customized batches of production after the addition of IT-enhanced machinery. So that took some time too. New types of skills were needed. Another thing I want to say, and hopefully it's a more hopeful one, is anyone who's doing anything in their job that is just routine and boring, and you have other skills to contribute, you kind of want automation to take those away, and then you hopefully want to show more added value to the firm by working on those skills. Yes, and then the other question about statistics. Yeah, so economists we're in the field of throwing each other with statistics to lie about things. So I'm really into pushing back against macroeconomists who hide things with GDP per capita. Averages hide the distribution. And labor economists are really concerned about inequality and distribution. So you can have good, great GDP statistics, but let's look at some other statistics. Let's look at the fact that you could have median incomes increasing, but ignore the fact that the price of education and healthcare in America has far outstripped the growth in wages. So if you talk about a real income that takes into account the price of education and healthcare, things are not going well. Maternal mortality rates have increased in our generation. Look at all our technological advances, but maternal mortality rates have increased. more than the previous generation. Life expectancy is starting to decrease. You look at all these real outcomes of the population and things start looking differently. The gains to the GDP are accruing to only a subset of people. So much evidence shows that.
Thank you.